When I recall my childhood in Armenia during the 1870s, I see the image of my father, whose influence left its trace on my whole life. His reputation as a poet and storyteller spread far and wide throughout the many countries of Transcaucasia and Asia Minor. His extraordinary and mysterious stories aroused in me the desire to become like the legendary heroes of these tales, and introduced in my essence an aspiration towards high ideals. When I was 10 and attending the Greek school, my grandmother insisted, "In life, never do what others do. Either do something nobody else does, or do nothing at all. Just go to school." I was chosen to sing in the choir of the Russian Orthodox Cathedral in Kars. The dean considered me particularly gifted. Although my family had destined me for the priesthood, he advised them to have me study medicine as well. According to him, the duties of a priest went hand in hand with those of a doctor, for the body and soul are connected. He suggested that I be taken out of school, for I was wasting my time there. He became my first tutor, but entrusted me to other teachers for certain disciplines. As for me, I dreamt of specializing in a technical field. From my earliest childhood, I liked to make and repair all sorts of things in my father's workshop. I quickly acquired my own clientele. My father had no business sense. He said that one should love work for its own sake and not for gain.
The young Gurdjieff is witness to certain supernatural phenomena which leads him to question the meaning and purpose of life. He searches out those who can answer his questions, and he reads all the books he can find.
I made a pilgrimage to the Armenian holy city of Echmiadzin. I also visited numerous sacred places attached to different beliefs. I was passionately interested in archaeology and explored the ruins of lost cities. My research convinced me that there truly was something known to men in the past, and that this forgotten knowledge could have been preserved within certain communities.
At the age of 22, Gurdjieff settles in Tiflis, the capital of Georgia. He works as an interpreter in the construction of a railway through the valleys of the Caucasus. The local authorities offer him large commissions to arrange for the railway line to pass through their towns. In this way, he builds up enough money to undertake his first long journey. He travels through Syria dressed as a Caucasian Tatar. In Jerusalem, he earns his living as a tourist guide for foreigners, mostly Russians.
My research next led me to Egypt, where I continued to act as a guide. In my free time, I try to understand the intention of those who had built these monuments. What meaning did they transmit across thousands of years? At the pyramids, I met Professor Skridlov, an archaeologist with a rigorous scientific mind, and his friend, Prince Lubovetsky, who devoted himself to the study of religions. Like them, I was full of questions about the deep meaning of being and the aim of life. The three of us formed the nucleus of the Brotherhood of Seekers of Truth. The interest we shared in common created a real bond between us. Each one studied with the methods of his own discipline. But we soon came to the conclusion that to attain our goal, we must share our experiences with other seekers.
Some go into monasteries, where rituals going back to the origins of Christianity are still being practiced. In Constantinople, Gurdjieff visits the brotherhoods of various dervish orders.
I went to Mecca and Medina in the hope of elucidating certain questions which I considered essential. But I did not find the answers I was searching for. I concluded that from the outset, all the elements of the secret doctrines of Islam had been concentrated in Bokhara. decided to withdraw into complete isolation, to meditate seriously on my situation and future course of action. I then understood that the answers to the questions that were tormenting me could only come from contemplative thought arising from the subconscious. I worked unceasingly in search of objective truth, both by myself and among those belonging to the seekers of truth, men of the highest culture. To provide the necessary means for my research, I opened a traveling repair shop, which was very successful throughout the Trans-Caspian region. Making use of all the experimental means made available to me by contemporary civilization, in particular the science of hypnotism, I concluded that three types of associations take place in man: thought, feeling, and motor instinct. I was now capable of treating through hypnosis the mentally ill, alcoholics, and drug addicts. I could also bring relief to those suffering from pain.
Several years pass, full of adventures, dangers, encounters, and dramas. Some of the seekers give up the search, others die accidentally.
I was seriously wounded myself on several occasions. On these long voyages of discovery, there was as much to learn along the way as there was on arrival. In the course of one perilous expedition in the heart of Central Asia, I came into contact with a universal brotherhood where all the members, whatever their religion, were united by God the Truth. In the universe, all is one, only the scale differs. In the infinitely small, we find the same laws as in the infinitely large. From the first ages of mankind, all religions affirm that man was created by God in His image. Man's inner structure is able to engender and manifest properties of a divine nature. I then took the decision to concentrate all the forces of my inner world in order to undertake a sacred task, to share with my contemporaries my research on the possibilities given by the Creator.
To be financially independent, Gurdjieff throws himself into all sorts of businesses. He manages fisheries, oil wells.
But the trade I preferred by far was dealing in carpets and antiques, which, as well as being very profitable, gave me free time and allowed me to choose where I lived. I continued my research into the unconscious and led several groups of people interested in my experiments. After 4 or 5 years of strenuous labor, I liquidated all my affairs, and in 1912 I settled in Moscow. I gave a series of lectures which attracted numerous intellectuals and scientists. Man has a complex structure. In the colorful language of certain Eastern teachings, man bears a similarity to a horse-drawn coach consisting of a carriage, a horse, and a driver. The carriage corresponds to the body, the horse to the emotions and desires, the driver to thought. But the passenger sitting in the carriage, instead of being the master, embodying consciousness and will, is now nothing more than the first passerby. Deprived of a master, contemporary man is in the grip of a coachman, half asleep, half drunk, and lost in daydreams. The horse has grown up like a mistreated orphan. He is ready to offer himself to anyone who gives him the slightest caress. As for the carriage, intended by nature to ride on bumpy roads, it has little by little adapted itself to city streets. But from lack of maintenance, it is in danger of breaking up at the first jolt. It is only when a man begins to understand that he has not the slightest power over himself, due to the absence of a permanent I, that he can perhaps attain, by great efforts, the possibility of his own development. I took the first steps toward the creation of an institute dedicated to putting into practice in man's life everything I had understood.
Piotr Uspensky, great traveller and writer, recognized in Gurdjieff someone capable of answering the great universal questions in a new and original way.
Higher knowledge is transmitted from age to age, from people to people. The truth, embedded in symbolic writings and legends, is preserved in the form of customs and ceremonies, and through the secret message of dance, music, sculpture.
Gurdjieff puts to the test those who wish to see him. He arranges to meet the young composer, Thomas de Hartmann, in a disreputable cafe, at the risk of compromising his reputation as an officer in the Imperial Guard. De Hartmann, fascinated by the intense presence of this strange man from the Caucasus, decides with his wife Olga to join the group which meets in St. Petersburg. At the beginning of 1917, the political situation obliges Gurdjieff to leave Moscow with his young wife and visit his family in the Caucasus.
With my father, then 82 years old, I resumed the conversations of my childhood. Does man have a soul? And if so, is this soul immortal? I think, he said, that man is born with a particular property that allows a very fine substance to accumulate in him, and which is capable of acquiring an existence almost independent of the physical body. When a man dies, this substance does not disintegrate at the same time as the body, but only later, after it is separated from it.
Several companions join Gurdjieff in his exile in the Caucasus, including Dr. Sternval, Piotr Uspensky, Thomas de Hartmann, and their families. Communal life of great intensity begins at this time.
I created conditions around me which brought each person back to the meaning and aim of his existence by an unavoidable friction between his consciousness and the automatic manifestations of his nature. Political events soon took such a turn that not only work, but even survival became a problem. One was never sure of still being alive the next day. To escape this hell, I organized a scientific expedition whose official purpose was to make a survey of dolmens in the Caucasus. It took us 2 months, accompanied by cold and hunger, to cross the passes of these treacherous mountains. I was tormented by a continual concern for those closest to me, those who had followed me, and the others who had stayed behind in the turmoil. Exhausted, we finally reached the shores of the Black Sea.
They reached Tiflis at the beginning of 1919, where a relative calm still reigns. Gurdjieff decides to open his Institute for the Harmonious Development of Man. He meets the painter and theatre designer, Alexander de Salzmann, and his wife Jeanne, a teacher of dancing. Alexander de Salzmann illustrates the prospectus of the Institute using allegory. To know, to be, to understand.
The mayor of Tiflis promised to find us a building worthy of an institution whose purpose was to study how the arts of movement, music and painting are related to objective science. In temporary premises, work on oneself began in earnest from early morning until late at night. I intended to create a ballet, The Struggle of the Magicians, in the State Theatre. I had already worked it out in Moscow.
Alexander de Salzman prepares the sets and designs the costumes. Thomas de Hartmann composes the music. Jeanne de Salzman, with her pupils, studies the choreography created by Gurdjieff.
Due to the prevailing unrest, I decided to liquidate everything in Tiflis, cross the border, and use my time and energy more effectively in some other country.
It is in Constantinople that Gurdjieff disembarks in 1920 with about 30 people. He opens a new institute in precarious conditions. Uspensky recalls, "It was a very interesting period. We wandered through the bazaars and old quarters of the town. Georgy Ivanovich explained what I'd not been able to understand on my own. That the dances of the Mevlevi dervishes were related to mental calculation exercises, often similar to those he had shown us in the Caucasus. Having obtained visas for Germany, Gurdjieff leaves Turkey on a freight train with some of his followers.
A man who is asleep cannot do. First, he must wake up. Once awake, he will see that as he is, he cannot do. He must die to himself voluntarily, to everything which constitutes his ordinary life, to what makes him a slave, a prisoner of his everyday habits. If he dies, he can be reborn. But the being which has been born must grow and learn. When he has grown and has understood, then he will be able to act consciously. He will be able to do. My first journeys in Europe brought me to the conclusion that the best place to open my institute was in France.
In 1922, thanks to the support of English patrons, he buys the Château du Prieuré near Fontainebleau. The small community of Russians who followed him is joined by intellectuals from England. Some of them are only interested in Gurdjieff's ideas. Others, such as Alfred Orage, brilliant editor of an avant-garde review, involve themselves totally in all aspects of the Institute's work.
Every animal works according to its constitution. He who works like an ox is worthless, and he who does not work at all is also worthless. The value of work lies not in the quantity, but in the quality. A man's work only has value when he engages himself to the very limits of his possibilities.
Like Catherine Mansfield, each person staying at the Priory could have provided inspiration for a good novel. One did not concern oneself with worldly considerations. Once one had passed through the gates, everything to do with one's private life or social status no longer mattered.
Here, there are neither Russians nor English, Jews nor Christians, only those who pursue one aim, to be able to be.
The principal aim of our practical work is to reach a much more sensitive state of consciousness, to discover a new attention, freed in particular from that automatic and unconscious phenomenon that we call identification.
I organize lectures almost every day. I presented certain information which must be assimilated to undertake work on oneself. One can study in an external manner the sun, the moon, but man has everything within him. You have the sun in you, the moon, God. You have all of life in its totality.
Gurdjieff gives ever more complex exercises. The movements and their sequence are given with precision and call for the development of the attention. Each position is felt as a different note in ourselves and in the world. Georgy Ivanovich closely follows the fluctuations of our inner state. Depending on this state, his behavior can vary from one moment to another. One is often struck by the fact that he always manages to make do with whatever is at hand. For next to nothing, he buys an old Air Force hangar to be put up in the ground of the chateau.
Every man can do whatever others can do. Genius, talent, all that has no meaning. The secret is simple: to do things like a man. Working like a man means to feel what one is doing, to think about why and for what end one is doing it, how it should have been done before, how it should be done today, and what is the best way of doing it. Or whether there is an even still better way of doing it. The meaning of work, rightly done, is the simultaneous action of the three centers: moving, emotional, and thinking. When the three centers act together, this is the work of a man.
By his presence, Georgy Ivanovich exhorts us to recognize the laws of nature and reminds us that all life, in the image of breathing, results from two opposite but complementary movements: dilation and contraction, evolution and involution, intensive work and surprise picnics. On Saturday, the day of rest, the women go to the Turkish bath. An old cellar was transformed into a steam bath, and the bathing pool was hollowed out of the rock. During the festive dinner on Saturday night, all that matters is who will tell the best story. With ingenuity and skill, Alexander de Salzman transforms some frames retrieved from the chateau's old greenhouse into stained glass windows. As Georgy Ivanovich says, if thought is active, the hand can become almost as quick. So, thanks to uninterrupted work, which sometimes goes on late into the night, the study house is completed in a few weeks.
When man, in a quiet state, acknowledges his almost total nothingness, he can then practice self-observation and self-remembering for a definite time. In knowing himself, he will know his inner structure. He will be able to see. The stop exercise allows one to leave the circle of deep-rooted automatic functioning. The movement taking place is interrupted by an outer command. The body is frozen at the moment of passage from one position to another. By perceiving himself in this unaccustomed posture, each person looks at himself from a new point of view and can think, feel, and know himself in a new way.
The journalists present at these demonstrations concoct fantastic interpretations of this work on consciousness, and some describe Gurdjieff as a charlatan. He succeeds in finding a way to have his mother and sister brought to the Prieuré, along with those of his family who survived the massacres in Armenia. He settles them in the Paradou, a small house close to the chateau. He must go to Paris twice a week to deal with business matters.
To bring about a lasting solution to the financial problems of the Prieuré, and so devote myself entirely to the teaching of my ideas, I decided to take my pupils on a tour of North America. When I saw how the presence of an audience distracted them, I felt it necessary to give several public performances in Paris before we set sail.
Georgy Ivanovich displays such patience and sensitivity that a feeling of respect rises towards him. One feels his force, full of goodness, which untiringly sustains us. It is a force one can almost weigh. He could give 1,000-fold more, if only one were capable of receiving it. At the end of 1923, several performances are given at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in Paris. These demonstrations are much appreciated, but Georgy Ivanovich teaches us that in such work one must not think of results and not expect praise nor encouragement. The work in itself is an aim. When the performances are over, he organizes a large New Year's celebration at the Priory with many guests and presents for all the children.
Less than 2 weeks later, I arrived in New York without a penny in my pocket. I was accompanied by a troupe of 46 people, most of whom, like myself, didn't speak a word of English. We were warmly welcomed by Orage. I had given him the task of bringing together those interested in my ideas.
In this city where God the dollar reigns, where prohibition and the foxtrot are rampant, Gurdjieff doesn't waste any time. Only 10 days after his arrival, without any prior arrangement, he gives a demonstration of the movements in a theatre. In difficult conditions, they go to Philadelphia and Boston to present their work. Gurdjieff is invited to a large theatre in Chicago and sees his reputation grow until a final performance is given in New York's Carnegie Hall.
This work on oneself needs nothing external. It only needs what is within. But on the outside, one should play a role in everything. Externally, a man should be an actor.
While his pupils return to France, he stays in New York to open a branch of his institute, to be led by Alfred Orage.
We must always start with ourselves. Take ourselves as an example, because we cannot see others through the mask they wear. Only if we know ourselves can we see another. For all people are alike inside. Others are like us. They have the same good intentions to become better, but they cannot.
Gurdjieff returns to the Prieuré in June 1924 with new members of the American groups, determined to put his ideas into practice.
1 month after my return, my unfortunate physical body, along with my car, crashed straight into a huge tree. I was carried to the Prieuré, where I remained in a coma for 5 days. Outwardly, I strived always to appear calm, so as not to worry my family, especially my wife and mother, both already seriously ill, utterly sacrificed themselves to take care of me. Several months later, my consciousness returned with all its force. Since I was unable, even when in full health, to put into practice the truth which I had elucidated for the well-being of man, it was necessary at all costs to do it at least in theory before my death. Having taken this decision on January 1st, 1925, I began that same day to dictate, for I was still too weak to write. As my theme, I chose events on the scale of the universe, and as the main hero, I chose the great Beelzebub in person, which would not fail to arouse hostility towards me in my future readers. My unforgettable old mother died after a long illness, and several months later, my wife, whom I loved with a unique and sincere love, left us as well. Now, the two beings nearest to my inner world lie peacefully forever side by side in a country which for them as well as for me is totally foreign. In spite of the constant physical and moral suffering I experienced, I continued to write unceasingly. I began traveling in order to relieve this suffering through new and varied impressions and be on the lookout for any new business deals.
Journeys with Georgy Ivanovich are always disconcerting. A person expects to be doing one thing and finds himself responsible for something else he has no training for. These conditions reveal each person's self-esteem.
I wrote at the Priory and at the Café de la Paix, my Paris office, and also in clubs and dance halls, which for some reason benefited my work.
The children in Gurdjieff's family, like those of the Priory's residents, take part in the life of the community. They are responsible for a little vegetable garden and look after the animals.
A child's education must be based on the principle that everything must come from himself. Nothing should be given to him ready-made. One should only propose ideas, only be a guide. I never teach directly, or my pupils would learn nothing. If I want a pupil to change, I speak to someone else, and in this way he learns.
While working on the music with Georgy Ivanovich, I had some very trying moments, Thomas de Hartmann remembers. To be able to grasp the melody which he played on the piano with only one finger was quite simply an amazing feat. To challenge me, he would often introduce subtle differences even before I'd finished transcribing it. This drove me to despair. "300 pieces for piano saw the light of day within the space of 3 years. At the beginning of 1930, Gurdjieff returns to America. From then on, he spends several months a year in the United States without ever interrupting his writing.
For 6 years, I lived without the slightest pity towards myself. I was compelled always and everywhere, in all conditions and circumstances, to remember myself. I had to keep myself without weakening, at an extremely intense level of inner activity, so as not to become identified with anything. After my automobile accident, it was as though I were dead. I am born anew. I remember how I was before. My thoughts, my feelings were heavy, very heavy. Now they are flooded with light. One month after I had finished the first series of my books, I began writing again. I chose to evoke my father's wisdom my first teachers, and my meetings with remarkable men during the course of my many journeys. In this way, I hope to answer everyone's curiosity about the outer forms my life had taken.
Due to the worldwide depression, Gurdjieff finds himself obliged to close his institute and to part from his longtime companions.
In 1934 in New York, I started writing the third series of my books. Life is real only then when I am.
He is distressed to learn of Alfred Orage's death, which follows a month after that of his faithful friend, Alexander de Salzmann. In Paris, Gurdjieff now lives a more solitary life. A small group of American women writers and artists sees every opportunity to meet with him. With his consummate art for upsetting any and all habits, every moment is a pretext for making something understood, for constantly challenging one's beliefs. By a word or just a look, he can reduce to ashes the brilliant setting of the Côte d'Azur.
Never forget that every stick has two ends. The devil can lead you to paradise, and God directly to hell. The most beautiful roses have thorns. That is what gives them their value.
Starting in 1937, Jean de Salzmann brings together a group of young French people. Among them are Henri Tracol, Henriette Lannes, the writers René Daumal and Luc Dietrich, who recount their experiences in their writings. In spite of the threat of war and the strong pressure of his American pupils to settle in the United States, Gurdjieff decides to remain in Paris. At the onset of the war, he receives Jean de Salzmann's pupils in his apartment, Rue des Colonels Renard. Everyone's difficulties and the curfew only reinforce the intensity of the exchanges and meals they all share. All through the war, his pupils overcame every obstacle to go several times a week to the Salle Pleyel, where Gurdjieff created new movements. It was a moment of freedom, snatched from the occupation and from fear. While privation is rife everywhere, Gurdjieff obtains credit at the finest gourmet shops. He generously offers help and comfort to Russian immigrants and the poor of the neighborhood, and supports them in his own way.
When people come to my apartment and see my paintings, they all say that I have the worst collection in Paris, and perhaps the whole world. But I don't see that by buying a painting, I can help someone who has painted it with all his heart.
Mr. Gurdjieff always supervises every detail of the preparations for Christmas. According to an established patriarchal ritual, he offers each guest a present, chosen especially for him. He will not hear of being thanked, and provides for everyone an unforgettable moment where a sense of the sacred is shared by all. The war over, Mr. Gurdjieff rediscovers his taste for unannounced trips. He knows how to win everyone's trust, only to abruptly make them feel their own self-importance, gullibility, or greed. He plays a role in order to make us present to ourselves, our weaknesses, and our automatic reactions. Mr. Gurdjieff is again in New York at the end of 1948. In his favorite cafe, where he so often used to work, he meets those who, with Piotr Uspensky, have been studying his ideas for a long time. Uspensky has just died, without having resumed his relationship with Gurdjieff since he left the Prieuré 25 years earlier. On the ship taking him back to France with Jean de Salzmann, the purser asks him if he should call him doctor, professor, maestro. He replies, "Me, a man." Gurdjieff decides to publish Beelzebub's tales to his grandson on a subscription basis.
After 50 years of preparation, and having overcome the greatest difficulties, I have now reached the moment to publish the first series of my writings. In order to accomplish this task, I need the help of all those who have understood something of the value of my ideas. I intend that the first series of my writings shall be made freely available to all who are in the need of their help. All those who have been personally helped by my ideas will have the opportunity to repay a part of their debt and help me to harvest what I have sown. When you do something, do it with all your being. One thing at a time. Now, I am sitting here, eating. For me, nothing else exists in the whole world. I am eating with all my attention. You must do likewise in everything.
In his little room, Mr. Gurdjieff meets people for private sessions. He gives precise instructions over a cup of coffee and helps each in his personal search. The apartment is too small to welcome all the people who wish to come to the readings, to the meals and to the music, when Gurdjieff improvises on his little instrument. Every day the dining room is packed. The guests squeezing even into the hall to take part in the ritual of the toast to the idiots. For the sages of antiquity, an idiot is simply a man who is seeking to become himself. Those who live in illusion treat him as a fool, an idiot. Gurdjieff finds ways to create difficult conditions. He puts everyone in question. He is capable of playing any role, preferably one that shocks the most. Beneath his gaze, the reactions he arouses bring intense moments of sincerity. For those ready to respond to the challenge of his demands, Gurdjieff forever draws them towards further adventures, full of unexpected inner discoveries. He takes his last journey during the summer of 1949 to the caves at Lascaux, the origins of man. He encourages everyone to maintain an unchanging I in all circumstances, and not to behave passively like a passenger in a car.
I have worked much. My book will soon be published. Everyone will be able to read it. Then I will go far away.